All right, so we will get started. Good morning, everybody. Again, this is Dana Miller with Inspiring Solutions, and Michelle is taking the day off today, so I get to be the hostess for Kim and Casey. Thank you for joining us. We're a free Friday webinar, and today we have Kim Peterson and Casey Claussen from Key Elements Consulting, and they are going to be talking about managing transitions and making the most of change. So the purpose of our monthly webinars is to deliver some monthly motivation, and during this time of crisis, everybody needs a little motivation now and again, and expose you to our inspiring programs or products and services. And we do like to have guest speakers or presenters come on, and so they have an opportunity to showcase their services. So today's agenda, we're going to discuss what change is, and Kim's going to talk about the definition of it and what it's doing to us these days, why people resist change, and finish up with some best practices for managing change. So I'd like to introduce you to Kim and Casey. They run an organizational excellence firm called Key Elements Consulting, and they work with clients in all sectors with strategic HR and organizational development initiatives that can range from implementing foundational people strategies and tactics to planning large-scale strategic change. So Kim and Casey are great to work with, and they will definitely give you some good information today. So Casey, I'm going to mute myself and then.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dana. Welcome, everyone. We're excited about today's topic, is navigating and planning for strategic change is something that we really enjoy. My name is Kim Peterson, and I'll be sharing this presentation today with Casey Claussen. So, you know, we can certainly say that during this time of unprecedented change, this topic really couldn't be more relevant. This change is not only impacting businesses, but really the biggest toll it's taking on the people as they transition from, you know, your normal daily routines into something entirely new. These changes can include adapting to new technologies, the loss of your coworker companionship, trying to balance working from home and taking on new roles as teacher and or caregiver to family members. So, and probably about the time we all get used to these new circumstances, it's going to change again, and there's going to be another period of transition to navigate. So, what is change? So, Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines change as to make or become different. Change implies making either an essential difference, often amounting to a loss of original identity, or a substitution of one thing for another. So with this in mind, we would like to ask for some audience participation here. When you think about the changes going on in your life right now, or some big ones going on in your organization or other ones coming up, what words come to mind right away? If you could just share those in our little chat box over here, that'd be great. You know, I think change can be, it can be scary, it can be exciting. Yeah, right, Lori, exciting, or a little bit of anxiety there, I guess. Yeah, because you don't know what's coming up, right? And so when you think about change, it's not really the change that does you in, but it's really more about the loss of the transition from what you knew and oftentimes are comfortable with to something entirely new. So with all of this in mind, I'm going to transition over to Casey to talk a little bit more about why people resist change.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. So, you know, this isn't going to be earth-shattering, I don't think, for any of you, but people resist change for a myriad of reasons, of course. And many of those, if not most, are fear-based. You know, fear of the unknown. It could be a perceived loss in status, a change in workload or reporting structure, concern about learning new things or appearing inept. You know, the list can go on and on. It's important to remember that change is situational, but transition is psychological. Change will happen. The situation, such as the new system or the new requirement to work from home, is put in place. It happens. But the transition is the key piece to keep in mind to create a successful change outcome, especially if you have the chance to plan in advance. But regardless, even in situations like we have now, where we are dealing with a change that is already in progress, actively focusing on the transition enables you to facilitate acceptance and ensure effective, lasting changes that retain all of those potential positive effects. We must make sure that we are catering our plans to account for that human factor, knowing that the unknown is scary. In fact, there are models that align change transitions with the stages of grief. And you can see one of them here, the Kubler-Ross change curve on the screen. Because when you really think about it, in reality, if something is going to change, it starts with a loss of something first, a loss of how things are or what we know to be true. And that takes time to process and transition through. So let's move into a little more on the process of transitions, that psychological component of change. So transitions start with letting go or unplugging from the old world and stepping into the new. Managing the transition focuses on that in-between time and is vital when the old is gone, but the new isn't fully operational yet. This neutral zone is critical to psychological realignment and repatterning. This is where we often feel like we're in no man's land or like we're in limbo between the old sense of identity and our new identity. And it's definitely where we are still uncomfortable. But by helping individuals figure out specifically how to realign and repattern their behavior, you are set up to step into the new beginning on a much brighter and optimistic foot. Typically, one of the areas you would want to start with in planning how to manage the transition process is analyzing and understanding in detail who stands to lose something in the change or will have to change their behavior, such as physically changing a process or needing more or less team versus individual-based work, things like that. This is going to look different for different stakeholders or employees, and not all are going to feel the impact the exact same way. So you want to make sure that is being accounted for, not treating all as if it was the exact same impact all across the board. Like Kim mentioned, people often resist the letting go, not the change itself. Even with an unexpected change like we're facing now, as a leader, you can still put focus into detailing the specific behavior and attitudes that will need to change to make things work effectively. If you can help others by making it clearer what is needed to reach the new beginning, even if you're figuring it out right alongside them, and maybe even more so then, that will ease their transition and related angst of letting go, because they know what they're jumping into and how, and that they're not doing it alone. Further, as a leader, you can help both yourself and your team or peers develop a new identity, a new energy of feeling galvanized by the circumstances, rather than victimized by letting them happen to you, and use it as a chance to rediscover your purpose. So let's take a look at the current looming change that most, if not all of us here are facing right now. This change from working with face-to-face interactions in the office to being forced to work from home. Now we're forced to spend more time apart and learn how to interact and conduct business and build relationships purely via technology. So you want to think about, what are we losing, at least on a temporary basis? It could include a sense of our previous normalcy. Could include water cooler check-ins or small talk, playing Gopher over the cubes for a quick question, some of the ease that comes with that of what we've known, even access to the fancy printer whenever we want it. Those are all components that our current change has forced us to lose a little bit of. And you also want to think about what is the in-between period like. Right now, many of us are facing upheaval, disruption, missteps, learning curves. Not all of those are inherently bad, but they can be challenges. And they can also be opportunities to take control of our response to the circumstances. You know, we often want our organizations and leaders to help in times of uncertainty. However, I think it's equally important to consider how we can help ourselves to become an active participant and not a wayward bystander that simply lets circumstances happen. You know, this is a unique case of organizational change where you as a leader or a participant have a significant impact on facilitating the transition. So a couple examples of how you can do this. You know, you can start with adopting a let's do this or a we got this mindset and create a sense of control for yourself by taking control of what you can, which is likely more than you may think too. So for example, you might not be able to control, despite your best attempts, you know, your internet from getting choppy or your child or pet from photobombing a video conference. However, you do control, you know, when you get up, your morning routine, what you wear, how you show up to meetings, how you respond to coworkers and your boss, when you step away from your computer, you know, thinking when you would take previous coffee breaks at the work site. You also choose how to create boundaries between work and home. And yes, even when they're in the same geographic area, boundaries can and must be established to find a workable balance that will be sustainable for you. Now, it's not to say we're going to get it perfect every day just because we're choosing to, but we must continue to try because tomorrow is another day. The change continues to be here, continues to happen and develop, and we must be persistent because we can figure this out. You know, during the transition period, you want to make sure you're putting conscious effort into staying open to learning. Don't be scared to ask questions, or if you think everyone else has figured out this new Zoom thing, but you're like me and still don't know how to turn on the cool feature that changes the background in your Zoom conference calls, ask someone. You know, questioning things is how we learn and grow and can find greater enjoyment out of the new things that we can learn as well. You know, there will always be something new, now and in the future, and adaptability means that you can find your way. There's not necessarily just one way to make it through. You also don't have to transition and adapt solo. You know, partner up, find a buddy or a group to check in with on a regular basis as you adapt together. Camaraderie through transitions is incredibly helpful as we as humans are inherently social beings. You can also create your own roadmap or milestones and then reward yourself when you meet those goals. You know, gamify it, make it fun, get a little competition. Whether it's, you know, simply making it through another day, which sometimes feels like a feat unto itself, or setting up and hosting your own first Zoom or WebEx meeting. You know, whatever it is, celebrate it. That is an accomplishment. It's progress. And that's repatterning and realigning to the new normal. So that's at least one thing that's going to be easier tomorrow. And lastly, remember to take a breath. You know, don't be too hard on yourself when it doesn't come as easily as you want. You know, when you see your coworker seemingly breeze through all of this, remember that looks can be deceiving and most of us don't highlight the areas we're struggling with. You know, we usually emphasize where we're confident, which can lead to a false interpretation of what others are actually going through. So just remember to stay kind both to yourself and to your teammates. You know, these are simply a few quick examples of repatterning your behavior and taking control during this time of transition to adjust to the new. You know, the change is already there, but this is your opportunity to get on board with it and make it work for you as well. And, you know, also support those around you too. Whether you are a leader in title or not, you can display leadership. And many of your teammates are likely having the same struggles. And, you know, there's a bond in that, along with an opportunity to show care and empathy. You know, no one is facing this unprecedented crisis alone, but together we can find new ways to overcome and likely even come out stronger and more resilient. Next, let's talk about some communication practices, which are always important surrounding any kind of a change, but especially now when we are facing higher rates of change and our increasingly virtual environments. So as a leader, how do you lead in times of uncertainty and through times of change? You know, it's really about what we like to call courageous communication. This is effectively communicating the good, the bad, and the ugly in a way that people can understand, process, and feel supported by. So you want to start with reality, give people the rationale for the change, the why, laying it out in the clearest, most dramatic terms. People don't connect with a solution when they don't feel, see, or understand the problem. So you have to be sure to market and sell that part too. Now, I'd say this concept probably applies more directly in your typical organizational change, whereas our current, forced societal change is already being communicated and reported on quite heavily. But then again, you can still see there are areas of uncertainty or where more clear-cut information would be beneficial. Either way, the concept is still important as it emphasizes that there can often be different interpretations of information, and also that more is not the same as clear communication. So this is a real opportunity where our organizations and our leadership and ourselves can step up and make sure that we are being very cognizant about how we are communicating and try to do it as courageously as we can. Even if it is a stumbling block or not good news, it's still best to honestly share that full picture, because truthfully, I've experienced this. I would guess most of you have experienced this, where people often pick up on what's actually going on anyways. And so it's better to build from a trusting foundation than overcome people worrying what else you might be hiding from them if you weren't forthright in some other circumstances or other situations. In fact, there was research done by McKinsey that found when senior management teams communicated openly and across an organization about a change transformation's progress, they saw 8 times greater success rates than those that did not communicate as openly and fully across their organizations. And this really goes to show just how far honest and trusting communication can actually take you. Additionally, you want to make sure you're getting out front to really control the message. People will fill in blanks if they aren't given a full picture, and that is almost always worse than actual circumstances. Perhaps some of you are familiar with the researcher and writer Brene Brown and her concept of the story I'm telling myself. And this is really about how people will come up with their own narrative of why someone or something is behaving a certain way, which oftentimes is wrong, but it's human nature to try to connect those dots ourselves if we're not given that information of how we got from A to B. So you want to be cognizant of this when determining what is being communicated, and try to take the perspective of someone without all your background on a given change so that you make sure you're sharing everything to help people fill in that full picture. And lastly, repeat, repeat, and repeat. There's been a variety of research on retention of new information, and one of the research studies that we found showed that we retain approximately 10% of what we see and only 30 to 40% of what we see and hear. So that means we are almost always missing or forgetting pieces of information. So you want to make sure that you keep repeating any of those key elements, especially in turbulent times where there's an extra challenge in hearing and processing all of the information that's coming at us. In times like we're in right now, there can be more power in showing your own vulnerability and struggles with the unexpected change that we're all facing. Most times, of course, we hope change is pre-planned and well thought out, but sometimes that's not the case, as we all got surprised with this earlier this year. Therefore, you can take the opportunity to model facing adversity with a positive and optimistic attitude. I saw a definition or a saying that I really liked the other day. It was, staying positive doesn't mean that you have to be happy all the time. It means that even on hard days, you know that there are better ones coming. I think that this concept has the potential to be very powerful when we really embody it. You do not have to sugarcoat or gloss over the difficulty. You merely have to remember that there can always be progress. We learn something new each day, With each new video conference, with each cat walking across our keyboard, or roommate Sasquatch walking behind you in a video meeting, these all play a part in helping us recalibrate our behavior and processing how to move forward in the new state. And tomorrow, you will know more than you know today. And also remember that as a change leader, you don't have to be the sole source of information. Have others help, give people a role in a change to help generate ownership of its outcome. And also by bringing in different perspectives like proponents and naysayers, formal and informal leaders, you're able to generate a more well-rounded idea of what communication and information can help sell the change the best, as well as address common points of misunderstanding or where there's lack of clarity that your singular perspective might not have realized, but bringing in those other voices will help make sure those areas get covered, and therefore also generate greater buy-in and participation in a change and a transition. As an added benefit, these individuals can then also become some of your greatest change ambassadors once they've become invested in the outcome. Next, use multiple communication formats. This may seem like common sense, but it's important to consider with a broad lens, especially in the times we are now where there's just more and more technology at hand. You want to make sure that you're choosing the best format for each type of information that you want to share. Does it need to be push or pull comms? Does it allow for questions, or is it merely informative? Are we talking about email or video and conference calls and intranets, shared calendars, virtual town halls, live or recorded training? The list goes on and on. So you want to make sure that you're matching that format with the information that needs to get out there in the proper way. It can also include using multiple voices. Messages from leadership at your organization can also emphasize the commitment and strategic importance of a change, that they are in lockstep in supporting what's happening as well. Just ultimately, you want to make people exposed to the information in multiple ways and at multiple touch points. And lastly, don't forget about feedback channels. Communication should involve two-way flows of information. Otherwise, how do you know if the message is actually being received, if it's been understood, if it's actually doing the job that you intended for it? This can be done through periodic checkpoints like focus group feedback or employee engagement surveys, whatever format makes sense based on kind of what situation you have going on. But then you want to use these feedback loops to help you know what is going on, how things are being perceived and received, and then make sure that you are flexible to adjust your strategy if it appears something isn't resonating or leading to the acceptance or progress that you need. Communication plans need to maintain flexibility and be reactive to the situations as they arise. Next, I'll transition back to Kim, who will dive into leadership's role in change and transitions a bit further.
Hi. Okay. Thank you, Casey. So if anyone's had a discussion about leadership styles with me, they'll know that I'm a big proponent of servant leadership. I'm one of those weird people that loves an environment of change and all things project management. So imagine how excited I was to learn that the Project Management Institute considers servant leadership style to be a key piece of successfully leading agile teams and organizations. And when I talk about agile here, it's not necessarily like IT project management. I'm thinking more about nimble, transformative. I think Dana and Michelle refer to it as visionary. So how does servant leadership and agile organizations fit into the discussion about making the most of change and transition? Well, disruptive changes, think about technology, the current situation we're in with the pandemic, global market competition, skilled labor shortages are really taking place at a rapid pace, which really opens the door for smaller organizations and startups to gain entry into the marketplace, creating a fast-paced, agile, or nimble business environment, right? So, for instance, for those of you who are not familiar with IoT, it's really short for the Internet of Things. Pretty much any physical object can be transformed into an IoT device if it can be connected to the internet or be controlled or communicate information. So think of a light bulb that can be switched on using a smartphone app. It's an IoT device. Security Today reports that we will see 31 billion IoT devices installed during 2020 alone. And that's rising to 75 billion by 2025. So that's a lot of digital transformation coming at us and just kind of change in general. So in a world of constant change and transformation, what are all our roles as leaders and team members in making the most of a transition for an organization? You know, how do we all come out the other side of change and transition bigger, better, stronger? Well, a large part of that rests on the shoulder of the leadership team. You know, and one thing I feel is worth mentioning here is that everyone's a leader. Like it or not, you're either an informal leader or a recognized leader in your organization. So be aware of what your behaviors and actions are saying to your leadership team, your team members, your clients. Is it saying, I'm willing to grow and take on more, or something entirely different? So with this in mind, I'm going to provide you with some highlights from a book I like to refer back to every now and then. It's William Bridges' book, Managing Transitions and Making the Most of Change. You know, he kind of shares his thoughts on leadership through this, and, you know, I've taken it, kind of put my own spin on it, as we so often do. But the first phase of this is what I call pre-game. You know, and this may not totally apply to our current situation, but typically you would use this time to kind of build emotional bonds of trust between leaders and team members, you know, do things like sell the problem. You know, we have to do this because if we don't, bad things are going to happen, or, you know, and participate in trust and team building activities too. Communicate in a way that shows everyone's in the same boat. And I think most importantly, live what you preach, because your actions speak louder than words. The second phase of this looks something like letting go, right? So you're in the middle of the change, you're still going to have some resistance, but keep in mind that your team members aren't really resisting the change itself, but they're more resisting leaving behind the past and the comfort of, you know, this is the way we've always done it. You know, as Casey said, give them time and space to process the loss. But really, in addition to that, I would define and address what it is time to let go of and what people do not have to let go of. Ignoring the loss won't make it go away. And kind of as Casey pointed out, Brene Brown said, if you're not giving them the facts and sharing the information, everyone's going to create their own story. And oftentimes it's not accurate. Something else is quickly address naysayers. You know, nothing will slow down progress like negativity. And it's going to set the tone, you know, within your team, within your department, the culture in your organization. So those need to be nipped in the bud right away. Celebrate the successes along the way, both big and small. Those small ones will help keep that motivation going forward when times really get tough. You know, people want to see that things are happening, progress is happening. So you want to keep those front and center. The next phase looks like something like accepting, right? So we all agree the change is going to happen. We might not totally like it, but, you know, and during this phase, people still feel kind of lost, but they want to know what the rules are. They want to know what's next. And as a leader, you really need to provide your team members with some form of control in their situation, kind of give them an understanding of what's happening to them and what's next. And this could be, you know, your strategic plan, your strategic vision. Keep that out in front and communicate it often so people see what the ideal vision of where it is we're going here and why they're going through all of this. Understand the situation from your team members' perspective. Oftentimes you've had longer to process this than they have. Clarify new priorities, reinforce them with practice and examples and rewards. And something to think about with this too is when you're developing those rewards or incentive programs, you want to make sure that you're doing it from a global perspective, right? Because sometimes if you're not doing it right, you're creating an environment of an us versus them. You know, you see it a lot of times between the sales team and operations. Sales are incentivized to go out there and sell. Well, and then you got operations kind of cleaning up and putting things all together, and maybe it's not totally jiving. So that's something to think about. And in the last phase, it's the new world, right? So this is where an agile or nimble culture and or leadership mindsets come in handy. Leaders really shouldn't get tied to a specific outcome, right? It's good to have plans and a vision. Plans may look good on paper, but circumstances change on a dime and life happens. You know, so if leaders can stay open-minded, kind of create that environment of trust, you know, this is where you'll see those innovative ideas and process improvement, streamlining. They'll all come to light through this phase. You can tell I get really excited about that. Retrospectives are something you see in agile environments, right? So the change is complete and everyone survived the transition from the old to the new. Does that mean you're done and you walk away? No. Then it's time for team members and leaders to really take a step back, take some inventory of the entire change process, figure out what worked, what didn't work, what can be improved upon, and if there are any opportunities for innovation. And you know, you don't need to wait till the end of a project or a change initiative to do this. It's always good to set those milestones in between and take a look at it at those timelines. You know, it can really be beneficial, and it's also a good kind of team building exercise too, and kind of keeps everybody on the same page. And a leader's role kind of in that agile environment is really to promote collaboration, conversation with team members, clients, kind of getting input, and really to remove impediments and address bottlenecks. So with all of that, you know, how do you know you're doing it right and you're navigating this change and transition process? Well, your workforce will be more apt to stay engaged and as a result, take care of your customers. You should see less fluctuation or dips in your productivity as you go through all of this. Innovation. So, you know, as Kim Gratney and Cindy Cool and Barb shared, there's a lot of opportunity in these type of situations. For instance, our current circumstances brought on by the pandemic, you know, we're already seeing innovative products coming out like watches that notify you to keep your hands away from your face, or letting you know you're less than 6 feet away from someone. One of them I really like is, you know, the new door openers that enable people to open up doors without actually needing to touch the handle. You know, so you don't have to pull your sleeve up over your hands anymore. It's really common to see innovative products and solutions come out of periods of disruptive change. So it's kind of keeping that positive mindset, you know. And as Plato said, necessity is the mother of invention. So, and I think it's also really important to note that during these periods of intense and disruptive change like this, it can bring about growth opportunities that push each of us beyond our own preconceived limitations. You know, we get to find out what we're capable of and incorporate those lessons in other things, both personally and professionally. And I'm not saying it doesn't come without pain, but you know, it's good to see the positive in the situation. So as we wind down here, I think it's really important to remember that by developing a deeper understanding of why change is difficult, how change initiatives go off track, and how to mitigate the risk, you can become a successful change agent. You know, someone who can really transform promising ideas into concrete positive results. You know, and if all else fails and life gets too stressful, you can volunteer at an animal shelter, spend time playing with puppies and kittens, or go out to Full Circle and spend time with Kim Gratney and Cindy and hang out with the horses. You know, it's a guaranteed attitude adjustment there. So, you know, we would like to, we're always looking for opportunities to improve our presentations and the information that we share. So if we could ask you to please complete the evaluation at the end of this, we would really appreciate it. And as our giving back to you, we'd offer you a complimentary 30-minute consultation on any of our services. So we hope to hear back from you. And we'd like to thank you for spending time with us today. We know you're all really busy. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us and we'd be happy to hear from you. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dana to finish out.
Well, thank you, Kim. That was very insightful, and appreciate the information that you and Casey provided us on change. You should have received a flyer with the last email I sent out this morning with our upcoming webinars and virtual showcases. I'd like to point out next month, we are having a different webinar. We're changing it up a little bit as we have been changing a lot of things in the past, but Kim and Casey's webinar today is a good segue into next month's webinar. It's going to be Visionary Leadership Strategies Beyond COVID-19. So as a leader, you're going to work with your team and identify what is working to create a vision and align it with best practices. With that vision, implement and execute an action plan based upon that vision. And we will work, put you in breakout rooms with your team, and it will also align with the Everything Disc Work of Leaders profile. So we kind of did this last week and we had a great turnout and good feedback. People really appreciated the opportunity to learn from each other. And I want to point out that that webinar is going to be 1 hour instead of 30 minutes. So it will be, there'll be 2 of them, one from 8:30 to 9:30, or you can join us from 10 to 11. July 17th, we will have another guest presenter, Todd McDonald, with ATW Training Solutions, talking about wanting to be a situational leader. Michelle will be back again on August 21st, staying positive in a changing world. And then our guest presenters for September, which I don't have on here, is Cindy Cool and Kim Gratney with A Full Circle. So they happen to be on this webinar today. Again, when you are done with this meeting, please take a moment to fill out the evaluation. We appreciate your feedback. And we appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. It's a beautiful day here in Central Iowa. So make it a great day for yourself and others. Stay home and be well. Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend.